What's going on, everyone? So a lot of you really enjoyed my previous video on the top 10 cards that I think have a lot of potential for the future. So here are 5 more that I want to go over, especially with what we've seen from recent tournaments, as well as a lot of the pricing right now is extremely reasonable. And so if you want to pick up any of the cards mentioned in this video, I have a link to TCG Player that helps me out as well as helps you out. Thanks for watching. Thanks for clicking on that link, and let's dive into the top 5 cards. So every single card listed in this video is either a rare or legendary, which is one of the reasons why I think these cards have a very high chance of rising in price as we get the next set, and of course as the meta evolves. The first one here on the list is Electrostaff, a 2-resource vigilance upgrade, giving your unit +2/+2. And whenever the unit that is upgraded is defending or someone is attacking into it, that unit's going to get -1/-0. And you cannot attach it to any vehicle unit. This card has been showcased a lot in Sentinel-based decks, where you might have like Chewbacca as your leader, you play whatever unit you have, you go ahead and give them Electrostaff, and suddenly they are a lot harder to deal with, as not only is the +2/+2 obnoxious and forces your opponent to trade into it, but also because of the -1/-0, you oftentimes are able to trade up because they require multiple units to go ahead and kill that unit that's upgraded. Again, this is mainly featured in Chewie lists, where you're going to deploy Chewie at the later stages, give him an Electrostaff, and suddenly he's really difficult to deal with. Or, you know, you're playing maybe Chewie green and you deploy an Echo-based defender, give him an Electrostaff, and suddenly that thing is really obnoxious to deal with. I think one of the big things with Electrostaff here is the fact that we are going into a set that is seemingly more upgrade centric, upgrade focused. And when you have a pretty strong upgrade, in fact, one of the only rare upgrades that we have right now, Electrostaff, is probably going to be an appealing option for those upgrade themed strategies. And I see this as one of the cards that a lot of people are going to go after and try. And I've already found pretty good success with it. Heck, even if you're not playing a more Sentinel based list, this could just be a very powerful stat boost and something that has to be dealt with quite frequently. Of course, one of the things that it does line up poorly against is the more controlling decks where they have things like Power of the Dark Side or Takedown. Obviously, if you put an Electrostaff on an Echo based defender, it can still be Takedown. So you do have to place this carefully, but it is a powerful upgrade and something that does have its place right now, and I think it'll get a lot better going forward. The next card I have on the list is Bodhi Rook. Now, this is a card that people have already played a decent chunk with, especially in the Boba Cunning lists. This is a 3-resource unit with double cunning aspect. It's a 3/3 Imperial Rebel, and when played, you get to look at an opponent's hand and discard a non-unit card from it. So essentially any upgrade, any event that you're going to find, anything like that that your opponent has, you are able to discard your choice. Now, this is exceptionally powerful, of course, against the more controlling lists, but also it very much size as well against a Boba list because of how many events they're playing, especially the waylays. Getting those out of their hand are the no good to me deads, and you get a 3/3 body not actually body, but I guess that's a little bit of a pun there, 3/3 body out of it, which is pretty sweet. Now, one of the big downsides to the card, and one of the reasons why we haven't seen this guy so frequently, is because of the double cunning. The fact that it is double cunning, the only places that you really see this card is Boba, because there's not really a fantastic cunning leader, and if you're not playing a cunning leader, then you really can't play double cunning. And oftentimes any sort of cunning base that you're running, let's say Sabine yellow, or let's say Han green or Han red that you're running, Body doesn't really fit too well in there because he suddenly costs 5. And if you're paying 5 for this, you better be getting the when played effect every single time, and it better be one of the most absurd, events taken out of their hand or something like that in order for it to be worthwhile. But in the future, when we get the card pool expanded, and heck, even if you're playing, let's say, yellow Mando or something like that, and you can benefit from the double cunning, anytime we get more cards printed for the aspects that are double aspected, those cards go up way higher in value. And there's also another one on this list that I want to talk about, because already in this first set, they're kind of over either statted or overvalue in terms of what they're giving you. The problem is that we don't have the card support for them right now. But I think Bodhi is one of those cards that, even with those restrictions, he's already seeing play. So I think he's going to get just that much better in the future. As I mentioned, there's another double aspect card on this list in Saw Gerrera. This one's a pretty sweet one. And I even tried to play it in Sabine Red, which is a pretty sweet list. I'll talk about that in just a moment. This one's a 4 resource unit on the ground. He is a 5/4 rebel. And as an additional cost for each opponent to play an event, they must deal 2 damage to their base. This one's pretty sweet. If you compare it to the 4 resource ground units that we are playing in other aggro lists, you're looking at essentially K2SO is the peak one. I think that's the ultimate one, the strongest 4-drop for any aggro list that you're playing. And this one actually has another power associated with it, as well as giving you a pretty effective effect on the card. Now, I still think K2SO in general is going to provide you more value, but I think this guy is a amazing sideboard card for those aggro lists. The problem is if he comes down on 6 resources, he's suddenly a lot worse. And I'd rather play things like Guerrilla Attack Pod, because they just oftentimes give you a lot more value. But if this guy's coming down on 4, suddenly your takedowns cost you 2 life. Suddenly your Power of the Dark Sides cost you 2 life. Suddenly their waylays cost you 2 life. And again, if they don't deal with Saw Gerrera itself, you are getting a 5/4 out of the deal. So even if they don't have a ton of events to play, a 5/4 rebel, which synergizes with all the rebel synergies that we have, is extremely powerful. The few downsides that you have for this card, with the exception of it being a double aspect, is the fact that it is not a heroism aspect card, which is relevant for certain rebel synergies, especially something like For a Cause I Believe In. This doesn't synergize too well, because you might miss a point of damage by revealing Saw Gerrera. But I do think this card in the future, if we get ways to potentially play Aggression and Saw Gerrera or Rallying Cry, these types of cards with double aspect, you will find this card be a very powerful sideboard option, or potentially even main deck, depending on how the meta shapes up. If we had the card pool to support double aggression, this card would be a card that I would consider putting in a lot of my more aggressive decks. Because if you look at the meta, the top 2 most popular decks include Boba and Sabine, and then right behind that, that's Darth Vader. So Boba is the most played deck right now, and they run a ton of events in Waylay, No Good to Me Dead. You're getting a bunch of damage off that. And of course, if you fight those more controlling styles, well, all of their events are suddenly way more painful. And yes, maybe you get takedown on a Saw Gerrera, which they could have taken down like a K2SO, and you get 1 less damage. But if you ever get a second trigger, it's suddenly a lot more valuable than a K2SO, which can be pretty impressive. The next one on our list is actually one that you might have seen very frequently in a lot of meta lists. Unlike the other 3 previous cards that I mentioned that have a lot of potential for the future, well, I guess I should say not unlike them, but unlike them, not being played in any deck at the current moment for the most part, this one is a pretty staple level card in a lot of the more controlling lists. And in fact, I've been running this guy for quite a while in a lot of my more mid-range / controlling lists, and he's exceptionally powerful. Emperor Palpatine, an 8 resource aggression villainy unit for the ground, 6/6 Force Imperial Sith official, lots of great tags, Overwhelm, and when played deals 6 damage divided as you choose among enemy units. This is one of those cards that just gives you a ton of value when played, and of course acts as a removal spell in the more controlling list, which is one of the most powerful things about it. But it's also acting as essentially a win condition, because a 6/6 can be very difficult to deal with, especially when you are the one controlling your opponent's board. Suddenly they don't really have the units to deal with a 6/6, or potentially even the events to deal with a 6/6 on the battlefield, which is really, really impressive. Now, one of the things that I've noticed about this card is, well, there's a lot of untapped potential. Of course, having a key name like Emperor Palpatine gives you a lot of potential going forward, but also any sort of synergies with Sith, Force, or Imperial can be really, really powerful going forward, specifically the Force and Sith tags, which I think are going to expand in the future. But also, this is just a very high value card. And if we ever get in a situation where you can divide this damage and get even more value out of it, potentially maybe claiming bounties or anything like that with the future cards, I see this card getting even more valuable in the future as a way to act as another removal spell in the more controlling decks while also giving you that win condition. And he's already played a lot, but he's just running extremely cheaply right now. I believe he's running for like $1.50 non-hyperspace, which is kind of crazy. So another one that I'm picking up a couple copies right now, just so that I have a play set of them before he gets way too expensive. Lastly on our list, we have Black One. This one's one that I've been toying around with very recently in a couple of my lists, and perhaps you'll see one coming in a video for the next few days. But a 6 resource aggression heroism space unit with 4/4 as its stats, a resistance vehicle fighter, and when played or when defeated, you may discard your hand. If you do, draw 3 cards. This one's one that I immediately looked at whenever I started playing Star Wars Unlimited, as it kind of felt like the perfect top end to the more aggressive heroism decks. I immediately tried it out in my Leia red deck, as well as Sabine green, which is some of the lists that I toyed with immediately when I first started playing. It didn't quite fit super well in those lists in the current meta. Not saying that it ever performed like atrociously, but the times that you played this out when you tried to empty your hand and then you played it to get some more cards fueled up in your hand, well, you kind of were already in a losing position. However, more recently, I started playing around with more Han-based decks, Han Red, especially after seeing the 5K tournament. And I was like, okay, this guy's got Han Red. He made it to the top 16. Let me see what Han Red has to offer. And Black One is one of those cards that actually is able to be leveraged most in a Han list because you use so many of your cards as a resource or temporary resources. And this one is one where 4/4 might not be super sized in a ground arena, but in space, a 4/4 can get the job done, as there are not a lot of units in the game that are played, with the exception of like Fett's Fire Spray and Avenger, that really do super well against Black One. And I got to get a lot of value out of it. Again, if you're able to leverage the additional cards that you're getting off this card, it can be very powerful. And in a space where you're going to be finding a lot of bounties to potentially leverage a lot of the additional cards or resources that you have, or potentially just playing out all your cards and then playing out this to get you a nice refuel. If you're playing, I don't know, Sabine yellow and you're playing Wanted on opponent's cards, and you're suddenly playing these 0 resource events or upgrades or whatever, you can really chew through your hand very quickly. And that's where a card like Black One I find to potentially be extremely powerful. I will say this one in particular is the most expensive card on the list because it is a legendary. And if you are looking to pick up any of the cards on this list, just note that this is only my personal thoughts. And so just keep that in mind if you are going to go out and buy any of these. I do think that they are high value right now because they are very cheap. Black One is one of the cheapest legendaries that you can find in the game. And it's still a very solid card. Every other card on the list is either like $1, $1.50 non-hyperspace. And so if you are picking up those, well, at least it's not going to be a huge investment for the future. But I do see these cards having a lot of potential, especially things like Electrostaff, as well as the double aspect cards in Bodhi Rook and Gerrera. I think these guys just haven't had a home quite yet, Bodhi Rook being the closest to having a home, but I see us having a lot of potential for the future. Let me know what you think in the comments down below. Are there any cards that you have on your list for being potentially underrated or getting extra value in the future? Let me know, and I'll see you all for the next one.